So Becca, I have been thinking about Nicolas Cage a lot lately. And you may ask, why the heck are you thinking about Nicolas Cage? Well, he is hosting a new series on Netflix called The History of Curse Words, which, and
Yes.
I immediately grabbed my attention because I think curse words get such a bad name. And I was thrilled that the first word they decided to profile was my favorite, which is fuck, because I feel like it's so versatile.
It
You can use it
is.
to express so many different emotions, so many parts of speech.
Yeah,
So
it can replace so many things. And it feels good coming out of your mouth. When you're really mad, it just like, it feels effective. And so it's like really, like this is it. And it's my favorite as well. I do like I like big long ones too, like motherfucker. That one also feels good coming out of the mouth when you're really mad.
it's a
But
cousin of fuck.
I am, first of all, I haven't had a chance to watch the show. So you know that I saw the trailer too. And I was like, this is my show. Obviously somebody has said, Becca, you need a show so that you can now have like autistic type information about curse words and not just use them freely. So I am ready to catalog curse words now, but I haven't had a chance to sit and watch it, so I'm totally looking forward to it. The fact that they chose Nicolas Cage as the host might just be like the cherry on top of the whole thing. So I'm excited for it. But I grew up in New York, so to me, like curse words are the sprinkling of adjectives in language, right? Like they're not, they don't have the same kind of impact on me. And I think I use them really freely because of that. As someone who grows up in New York, it's like every other word, especially if you really mean what you're talking about. The more you mean what you're talking about, the more curse words get kind of sprinkled in. I really don't think about it. And I used to really panic when I would present, because I'd be like, whenever I get really passionate about something and it really means something to me and I become myself, the New York accent comes out, I start cursing about everything, and right? So I would be presenting in front of people and all of a sudden I'd be like, and that's bullshit, right? But now that I have learned to love my authentic self, I just do. Like, this is me. If you're gonna hire me to do like a speaking engagement, this is what you get. Right? If you're going to be offended by a curse word, I don't know what rock you're going to live under for the rest of your life. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I have a very different experience with curse words. That's how I grew up with them.
And I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I think maybe the first curse word I ever learned was from my grandmother, because my dad's from Yonkers. I was born in the Bronx, so my grandmother lived there her entire life. So she cursed, but it was like an intellectual manner, and my parents kind of told her to stop doing that with me when I was like 6 or 7 years old. But I think those were the first curse words that I heard.
That's fantastic. I think that's so awesome. I was born in the Bronx also, so that's really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't even know where, probably my mom was a trucker too. The two of us had like trucker mouths, so it was really interesting. But I don't know, we've had some interesting responses. Some guests don't feel comfortable saying the curse words in the questions. So, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like to be true to ourselves, Doug, we need to leave the curse word question in.
We will definitely fucking leave it in.
Yes. Well, let's get on to our guest, because we have a really fun guest with us today, which is great because, fun is my purpose on this whole show. So joining us today is Michael McCreary, and I'm so excited to have him. He is AspieComic, right? And I'm excited to know more about Michael McCreary than just that he stands behind a microphone and makes people laugh. Right? I'm excited to know what else gets him excited. So that'll be really fun. So welcome, Michael, to joining us.
No, thanks, Becca. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I think so. I think we'll have a good one with it. So Doug is always ready with his excellent questions, and I'm excited for them.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you, Michael. One of the reasons is throughout my life, and I never went down this route, I always wondered about, should I do stand-up comedy? But there was two things that have stopped me from doing it. One, I'm not that funny, so that seems like a problem. And two, just the fear of, I think, judgment, just being on stage on my own and the crowd just not laughing at anything I have to say and throwing food at me or something. That's kind of what I envision. So I was wondering for you, kind of does that affect you thinking about that in any way, like the unknown, like negative judgments that probably aren't coming your way from people?
I think it used to, but then once you've actually been through it, you realize there are many worse things that could happen to you, right? It's I remember the first show I ever did. It was at McMaster. It was for doctors. I'm sorry, just for a little bit of background, and I don't want to step on your questions, Doug, but I started doing stand-up with a group called Stand Up for Mental Health. And at first, I didn't think I was going to get in because, one, I was 14 at the time. Everyone else was like, I think the youngest person in the group was like 26. And also, it was more a group for people with, say, like psychological variations rather than neurological ones, right? So there wasn't anyone in there with like autism or FAS or Down syndrome. It was more stuff like bipolar 1, 2, schizophrenia. So they didn't really know if I'd be a good match, but we ended up really hitting it off, and it was fun. We did the first gig, and I remember I was like, it is one of the scariest things in the world because you're kind of like, I think I was more scared actually about talking to doctors as opposed to the general public. Because I was just aware of sort of the social contracts that bind and that kind of thing, where it's like, you're in a very rigid sort of, I don't want to say corporate environment because it wasn't. It was like just a show for like a university. But again, like you have a very formal kind of attitude in there, and you're like, I don't know how this is gonna go, and it went really well. So after that, I kind of went, okay, well, if I could make doctors laugh, then I guess this probably won't. I mean, it was fun. It was, I think like, I'm trying to think of like, I can't really get into depth about like the worst time I ever bombed. I'll tell you, it was on my tour in 2014. And I remember there was a moment, it wasn't exactly bombing. I've had the opportunity to sort of revisit because I like to record all of my shows to see where I went wrong. And I remember there was, I just had like an epiphany where I kind of went, yeah, this really wasn't that bad. But when you're in the moment and like there's pockets, but like in comedy, you want to sort of sardine people into a venue because it's not that you're especially funny. It's that you're deploying these sort of Pavlovian techniques to condition people into thinking you're funny, right? So if you can get one person with an especially loud and obnoxious laugh to laugh at you, that everyone else does. Exactly. It's contagious. So we had done all of that. We had basically engineered this show for success, and it just wasn't working the way as intended. And every other show worked out fine. But I remember in the moment, I was kind of, I was panicking because it was like the second or third show in the tour. And it was, and you kind of go, oh, this isn't a good sign. But no, like after that, you realize that it's really, like, here's the thing, Doug. Like, if you want to get into stand-up, most people think that it comes down to natural talent. There's a great line from a show, I can't quite remember, but they said it's not art, it's a parlor trick. So like with magic, where you just learn sleight of hand, how to put people's attention one place where you're going another place, you just need to figure out the mathematics of it. So, I mean, like, really, you could look up just any, if you wanted to, you could just look up, like, joke math or joke structure, and very quickly you would just go, okay, joke equals premise plus punchline. So premise is like a point of view where you have an extreme opinion about a banal subject, or a very banal, or again, a very laissez-faire or even opinion about something very controversial, and then you just heighten that into absurdity. So like once you get that down, you're kind of like, okay, I mean, I got the rhythm down. So it's yeah, it's like I'm not funny, it's just math.
Wow. I think it's so interesting. First of all, I have to say that was the most autistic answer to this question ever, because we know all of these. Do you understand? Like, we don't look at things and go, oh no, that was funny. It was funny because of this. No, we look at things like, hey, can I recreate this? What's the formula here? And let me find the pattern, right? It's so like pattern thinking of how we deconstruct a topic. So I just thought that was just so cool to hear how your brain processes all of it. Well, I also now feel we should go on a mission to get Doug to do stand-up comedy.
No, it's
like, Doug, it's just an equation. Michael, he's not that funny. He has an equation. You're good. We'll take you.
You just want to laugh at me. I think that's what all this is.
I want you to grow. I want you to evolve and push yourself out of your little bubble.
No, but like anyone can do it if they really want. The scary thing for people is just I mean, the scary thing is it's no different to other performing arts, right? Where you're just aware that like you write the joke and you're very proud of the joke, and you're terrified because the reason people make art is so that other people can like relate to them, right? It's not even that you want necessarily like you don't want to reap the rewards of fame and success in that sense, in a material sense. Like I think people are just deeply lonely and they want to know that other people feel the same way. And if they can move people in the same way that they were able to move themselves by putting their thoughts down on paper, then it's a success. And when it doesn't work out that way, it is heartbreaking. So that's why I stopped going to open.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's an ownership to it. It's like any other creation, right? It's so disappointing when people don't embrace it the way that you want it to be embraced.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, at a comedy show, people aren't there to laugh. It's not their job to laugh. It's your job to make them laugh, right? But again, the tough thing is just, and it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing open mics other than COVID. But it was, I remember I did several of them and I got into the discipline of doing them and they went fine. And but I remember just that perennial disappointment of knowing that I'm sort of delivering these into nothing. And other people in the room know that exact same thing because the entire audience are just other comics on the bill waiting for their turn to talk. And so everyone has that same, so everyone gets to subject each other to that same silence. And it's not really a fun vibe. But actually, when you were talking about sort of applying that, I don't even like that. I mean, some people might call it pedantry, but I think pedantry is pretty surface level. When you're just talking about applying analytical principles to anything, I don't know if you guys have really gotten into semiotics. I started reading Umberto Eco, who's his life's work is all about unpackaging sort of cultural codes. So semiotics is the study of signs, right? And so signs can be anything. It can be sort of a gesture. It can be anything that has a denotative meaning, i.e. say a touch has a texture to it, but then you have a connotative meaning of what that actually means. It's not literally the thing as it feels. And so I've just been, I don't know too much about it right now, but I've always been sort of fascinated about the kind of long-held cultural assumptions the world over that we have about things that we sort of never really intellectualize. And credit to Umberto Eco for getting me to think about that.
Wow. I think that's awesome. All right, here we are, new special interest right away. I'm excited. Now I have to go researching it myself because I want to understand it.
Yeah, it's cool. It sounds really heady at first, but really you just go, oh, it's just the study of signs. So that can be the problem is that it's such a broad, vague sounding subject, right? Is that it's not
what is a sign? What makes
because it was an Austrian guy who developed semiotics, and I remember he said something about because I mean, what kind of makes you go, okay, so it's like linguistics, and he goes, well, technically linguistics is a system under semiotics, and you go, oh, this is right, because you go, that is because language would definitely fall under that, right? And it's just, yeah, I know, it's I mean, the thing about, and my girlfriend loves Pokemon, so I think I finally found my Pokemon. Except I don't have anyone to talk to about it. So thanks for inviting me on.
Oh. Who knows who's going to be listening? You might just find someone who knows more about it than you who's listening.
Yeah, no, it's but it was kind of she said the intrinsic appeal of Pokemon was that you could constantly categorize, segment and categorize things by type, by subtype, whatever. And because Pokemon, I don't know if it has. I think it might be one of the only pieces of intellectual property on the planet that has universal recognition. So because it is such a rampant success, they will continue to produce Pokemon indefinitely. So she basically says it enables her to it facilitates her interest well into the future and well after she's dead. So with semiotics, it's one of those things where I go, I don't want I define an autistic interest as an interest that will outlive you by centuries. Right. That will just keep going.
I mean, that would always be great. I wish that most of my passions and interests would stick around that way, but somehow my brain just goes, yeah, I'm done with that topic. Thank you. We're full.
I used to be that way. Yeah. Bye-bye. I used to be that way, but then I mess up because I find something that reincorporates those other things that I sort of,
right.
Sorry,
build on each other somehow. You're
exactly. So everything just kind of stacks, which is kind of happy because then I realized, I do remember that. Because when I was a kid, I would sort of ping pong from one interest to the next, and I would always get depressed because I used to know everything about, say, the original six in the NHL, and then I forgot that in favor of dinosaurs, and then I could tell you everything about like the Triassic period through to the Cretaceous period, and then I forgot all that, and now I know about movies. And so to me, it's like there is something innately depressing where I kind of go, man, I kind of wish I hung on to that because I think
Right. Like I would be
Yeah.
so smart if all the things I once knew stuck there, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Like to me, the way that I usually read books now, because like usually it goes in one ear out the other. And so I realized that you can remember a book if I used to do community theater and I wasn't good, but I was really good at memorizing scripts. So I said, what if I just tried memorizing books just for fun? So right now I've been sort of trying to do that just to see like if I can retain
Right.
anything, you know what I mean? But
How
that's the problem.
long? Right.
Yeah. There's a really great movie. It's based on a play called Insignificance. You guys should check out. And there's a really heartbreaking scene where like two characters that are very obviously like they never call them who they are, but they're very obviously Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe. And there's a moment where they think they have a moment of connection because she's been able to memorize like one of his theories. And the second he tries to kind of like talk to her about it, he's like, so you understand this? And she says, no, but I've memorized it because she's like, I'm an actress. Like that's sort of like like just a skill I've acquired is that I'm able to sort of retain these things and tell it back to people. And then he said, but you don't actually know what this means. And she goes, I understand like what you're saying, but I could not build upon it now. And then he just gets really depressed. And I said, yeah, I don't want to be like, I'm just regurgitating information. I want to actually be able to make sense of what it is, but also remember what the things are.
Yes. And it's hard because I think when we get into a topic, we want all the details possible. So to retain all those details becomes an impossibility. But I love when my brain pulls something from nowhere where like I went through a dinosaur period and I love when I can just randomly see one and go, oh, I know when that was around and I know what that's called. And I know, you know what I mean? And then I'm like, all right, so some pieces stayed, like some things are around. But for me, it's TV show theme songs that are stuck in here. And I know all the words and I know all the and I go, well, man, I wish I could like ditch them a little bit and open some space up because there's some stuff I'd like to remember in there if I could have some space for it. But that's my talent is TV show.
What themes? Do you mind if I ask you about that? Like what themes are the ones that constantly come to mind?
Always the ones from the 80s. They were really catchy, right? So like Family Ties, right? That was a great one. Yeah. What are the other? I mean, well, Laverne and Shirley, that's probably one of my favorites, right? Sure. But like it was because I was a TV kid and like that's how I learned about social was through the TV and through other, watching the stupid sitcoms in the 80s, right? And
no, but like sitcoms are kind of
soundtrack
like,
for me. It was,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but in a lot of ways, there's like, I forget who it was. I think it might have been Felix Biederman, but he had this really good quote where he said that podcasts are like a friend simulator, but really you could say sitcoms were like the friend simulator of like
they
the
were
60s
social stories,
like
right?
90s.
That's all they were.
They are, yeah. Yeah, it's like Cheers where everybody knows your name, where even though the stories in Cheers were, say, more fantastic than, say, the stories in, like, Family Ties, which are comparably more banal, like, you'd still have, like, that feeling of, oh, you just have a surrogate family. That's why they use family.
And there's that idea, right? So then it teaches you that at least it taught me in some way, right? The concept of, like, okay, other people want that belonging feeling, right? And some people find it in bars, right? And that's, like, that was my early lesson. But I know that when I started bartending, right, Cheers was my, like, that's how I imagined it. Like I wanted my my regular customers to come in and for me to know their name and know their drink and like, you know what I mean? And so that's how I learned. Those were the social stories I learned by. And so, yeah, sometimes it's just, something will happen and the theme song just comes in,
Bartenders are like the kind of I think they're the closest thing we have to like an old man whittling on a porch. Like, you know what I mean? Just like sort of like like cool Americana where you just have a guy cleaning a glass and they can just tell you stories. I was like, that's like, I don't mean this as a knock, but like bartenders are the only people you could walk up to like in a video game and just ask them anything and they'll just like give you
it. But it's like that in real life too, I promise.
Yeah, it's cool. It's so cool.
But for me, that was controlled social. That was like, yes, I want to socialize with these people and I want to be in a bar, but there's like 6 feet of wood between me and you, right? And I'm in charge of the conversation. If I don't want to talk anymore, I have customers down there and I walk away.
That's a really good name for like a memoir, for like a bartender memoir.
I have so many stories because I was in Manhattan, and so I had.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I have stories.
You
Well, you said
lots of
both of you said that
stories,
you were
I'm
born
sure.
in both of you said that you were born in the Bronx.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
like you guys were born in like a really interesting city with like such a rich cultural lineage, and I'm from Canada, so like our histories, if it's not horrible, it's really boring. So like I feel bad because I'm like,
Nice. That's what we know. We know you're nice.
well, like no, yeah, I think we've tricked people into thinking we're nice. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like, because to me, like I learned something abroad where they said, hey, if you're going to Europe, wear a backpack with a Canadian flag on it because then people won't think you're Americans. And I went, that really sucks. Like, I don't want to. I want people. You know what? I want them to think I'm Americans. I don't like judgmental people. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of
it'll clear them
that's how I felt.
away.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I just went, wow, that's really presumptuous because I'm like, I think I've met about as many nice Americans as I've met horrible Canadians. So, like, where do they get off?
I don't know, but we do. We're a little arrogant, I think. When we go, there's the assumption,
you're-
right? I think Americans just carry this assumption that the way we do it in America is the way it is everywhere else. And so when we go other places and it's like metric system, we're like, but why don't you use what we use? Like, why? You know what I mean? And so that kind of, and it's almost an ignorance, I think. And I think it's that we carry with ourselves when we go other places.
Sure. Like,
It's just
I don't. Yeah, I guess where like I find something weirdly refreshing about an American who is sort of like belligerent and ignorant about something than like a Canadian who's kind of like so used to being complimented that they don't really know why they have the nice things that they do. You know what I mean? It's like it's just I don't know. Like I don't want to get too controversial here, but just I think in the last couple of years, Canada's sort of I guess what we'll just say is the Canada's like the identity that it projects to the rest of the world has really been interrogated over the last couple of years. And I think that's kind of good. Like, and I think interrogated by itself because it's like, because I think a lot of people are kind of going like, hey, you descended from the same imperial powers that like America descended from. Why do you think you're any better?
Yeah.
And they kind of, and I think they're going like, yeah, I guess you're right. You know what I mean? So that's, and I think that's important to have that kind of.
That's interesting to know, actually, because I just think, we're told down here, I think my experience with Canadians is that you guys are nice. Although the Canadians that I know, not that they're not nice, but they're not any less nice than a New Yorker. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I think that New Yorkers are like, I remember like, I think I've met more nice people in Boston than I met in Toronto. And that's really depressing. But I was like, just because like in Boston, what's kind of fun is like, I admire the frankness as opposed to like this kind of, it's not even performative niceness. Like I actually find people in Toronto are really quite rude. And there's a really good line from the second season of Fargo that I think sums up, they were talking about Minnesota nice, but I think it applies to Canada where the Bokeem Woodbine character, he's great in the show. He says something, I think the line is like, he says, it's funny, Minnesota nice. You're really not that nice. You're actually quite rude, but it's how you're being rude. Like you're doing me a favor. And that's his line. And that kind of sums up.
Oh, that
sums up a lot of places in Canada where you go, yeah, it's just like a country full of wasps. You know what I mean? Like that's
that's so interesting. Yeah. I would totally not think that. And I've been to Canada a bunch of times, but you're really true. Because now that I think about the actual Canadians that I know, yeah, no, not so nice.
I think New York.
It's like it's very passive aggressive.
Yeah, New Yorkers, I think, definitely get a bad rap, like being rude. It's just direct.
It is.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's the rap that autistics get. The same rap. We are direct and blunt and honest, and and so I got it 2 times. That's why everyone stays real clear, far away from me, because they know I'm a truth teller, right? And so I can't help it.
But when people have like all these archetypes etched into their mind of like, the cab driver that he could tell you anything about any street, like I could go, I see it all in my head. Maybe that guy is just autistic. You know what I mean? Maybe he's just like,
right?
Maybe he just loves maps. He just loves roads.
Yeah, that would be the best taxi driver ever. You get there so fast, beat all the traffic and everything. You know all the traffic patterns, and when all the lights change color and stuff, it'd be great.
Yeah. That's why, I hated the movie Mozart in the Whale, because that guy's a cab driver, and the first thing we see him do is crash because he's talking about how much he loves streets. And I went, no, he wouldn't have let that happen.
No, not if he really loves driving.
Yeah, where's Mozart in the Whale set again? I watched that for the first time in years recently, and it did not hold up. But not to be mean.
We just talked about autism in the media when we had Dave Fincher on, and that's. like just when we go back and we look at those archetypes in movies and stuff, and we look at those characters, yeah, it was a step forward then, but man, when you go back, it is unpleasant.
It was in a, oh yeah, this is very much, it was in Spokane, Washington. Yeah, the movie has a very Pacific Northwest vibe.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I was looking at it and I went, okay, right, everything's very autumnal. But it's, I'm actually writing a book right now called Autistic about film, where I'm sort of, I'm less intrigued about. The first part of the book is obviously like, I kind of want to go, okay, let's just get it out of the way. Autistic representation in film. Here's the kind of archetypes that have endured. Here's how they've changed. Here's how they are in relation to genres. To me, I'm actually more curious about the kind of films that autistic people gravitate towards and sort of project on it. Because to me, I've always been more interested by not the movies that are canonically, about autism, but are rather co-opted by the autism community in the same way that,
just identify, right?
Yeah, there's a great series on the Criterion channel, which is wonderful, called Queer Sighted, where every couple of months they sort of apply a different series of kind of queer readings, to say horror films to different genres and whatnot, and sort of unpackage these kind of archetypes and tropes. And to me, I'm like, yeah, there's totally room for that when it comes to autism, because it's or just feeling other in some capacity because of your neurological wiring. So to me, I wanted to find out what are the kind of things that people identify with. And I actually learned, and this goes back to the friend simulator of sitcoms of yore, I think a lot of people just end up identifying with long-running television, like detective fiction and stuff like that, procedurals, because they're like, wow, I see this guy every day. And unlike sitcoms where they kind of get older, you're watching Criminal Minds, and I forget what the character's name is, but my friend was like, yeah, he's reliable because he'll always be the way that he is. I can always expect him to kind of do this. And my girlfriend is obsessed with Sherlock Holmes, so that kind of falls into that.
And Bones is mine, right? I love
Bones. Yeah, exactly.
And I loved her. And I think, but that's it to me. It's when people aren't trying to portray autism, right? And they're just giving our personal characteristics to a character, that's when we get the closest accurate representation. I think the ones that we identify with when we see a character where we're like, oh, I do that too, and right, and we have those moments, and it's always the ones where they won't explicitly say that this character has autism.
My favorite accidental autism movie, I guess we could call it, is and it was again accidental in the most extreme sense. They did not intend this, but Punch Drunk Love. I think the Barry Egan character, the Adam Sandler character in that. Obviously, Paul Thomas Anderson was just a huge fan of the Adam Sandler comic character and wanted to sort of translate that persona to a more to the real world, where he's kind of okay, in Adam Sandler's world, he's kind of a whimsical man-child, but in the real world, he's an antisocial weirdo. How do I translate that? But in taking this comic character and putting him into a different context, he accidentally just created a really to me, a very sympathetic portrait of just an undiagnosed man with autism.
Right, where you're just that alien feeling in a scenario, right?
And the sound design is so good. Yeah, because what actually got me about it was the kind of soundscape, because the way they would sort of create they would sort of direct you with your ears at times, where you'd sort of be even though you'd be in a close-up, in a handheld close-up, you'd be sort of looking to one edge of the frame because you could hear what he is hearing at the time. There's a lot of psychological interiority where you're in his head and you could hear sort of the crinkling of paper, right? You can just the happening of the warehouse that he works in, where you can hear just a forklift driving around in the background. And it's just, again, it's just good direction, because for him, I think in an interview he said he wanted to make a rom-com, or sort of a classic, something in a vein of a classic musical, where the photography is lockstep with the soundtrack. But in doing so, all these formal tricks that he deployed and was mobilizing, they just ended up reflecting things that I could relate to. And so I was this is what good autistic art is to me, just a complete accident where I'm yeah, this is wonderful.
I mean, because they haven't tried, right? It's almost the effort, or because they, it's once they use the term autism, or they decide they're going to formally say the character is an autistic character, I don't know what happens in people's brains, but then the humanity disappears in that character, right?
Because they become a checklist, right? they become like a checklist, right?
Yes, right. Like I need to make sure that they can visually see or auditorily hear the symptoms of autism in this character, right? As though we all have all the symptoms too, right? Like that's
Yeah, exactly.
the crazy part. And so
Yeah, like,
it's so inaccurate.
like one of, weirdly enough, and I found this in my studies, like, and I talk about it at length in the book, is I was so pleasantly surprised by the movie The Accountant, not because the movie The Accountant is good, but I went, Christian Wolf is like the first autistic character who is autonomous that doesn't actually have a superpower. And it got me really stoked because I went like, okay, so he's proficient with weapons, he's proficient with like mathematics, numerology and stuff like that. But then I watched and I went, oh no, he actually just kind of gravitated to these subjects because they piqued his interest. And he was lucky to have mentors in his life that could feed into that interest and enable him to sort of develop them over a long period of time. And I love that he's also the first autistic character I've seen that's like socially adept.
Right, that he can pass, right? Like we talk about masking and passing all the time. Well, why aren't your autistic characters masking and passing, right?
Yeah, I was like
where are they? Where is that experience, right?
No, I watched the movie and I was like, this is like, because the movie The Account is funny because I'm like, this is simultaneously kind of boring, but also kind of rules. Like, I don't know. It was sort of like, it's like, it was great because I was expecting something more fantastic like Jason Bourne, where it's like he's like, you know, he's like a shell, he's like a sleeper agent. But when something, you know what I mean, it's like the autistic superpower, right? Is you're like, see this kid see this kid do math, like, you know what I mean, like he doesn't seem like much, but no, like I love all the sequences where again you just see him like kind of doing these sort of it is performative, but they don't lean into it hard. I think Affleck just like is the right choice for this kind of a character because I find that like, because Affleck is not a bad actor, but he's just like, he's just a very like, you know, he's like sort of a generically handsome man with like enough sort of like natural charm that you can kind of be like, so he can pass. He can be kind of like, he can deal with neurotypicals in like a traditional forum. And then he can indulge when he's like on his own and really get,
which is the way most autistics live our lives, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much our experience. And I think, well, maybe one day a film will come out where we'll hear the voiceover of the autistic character's mind, and that we can know what, you know, what it's like. I'm currently like masking with this person and I can't do it anymore, so I gotta go. Like,
a movie my girlfriend really loved because she went like, this kind of like, she said, this actually kind of gets me in a way, was Chungking Express. Not because any of the characters are autistic, nor do they have anything that's behaviorally consistent, but the way that Wong Kar-wai film, like the way that him and Chris Doyle in his movies, they always shoot in deep focus, right? They shoot in deep focus, but they usually have a character right close up to like the frame, right? As like a screen division. So you can see the expression and you can see the world that surrounds them in tandem. And usually on top of that, to compound the kind of claustrophobic nature of the image, you have that character in the foreground's narration talking over it. And she went, there's a shot in like Fallen Angels too, where she went, oh yeah, that's like, I get that. Where like the one character's just like kind of smoking a cigarette and looking in a mirror, like looking through a waterfall, and you have like people in a bar being noisy behind her. And she's just like kind of zoning out while she like monologues in her head. And she went, this rules. Like she said, it's just like, this like is just, it's just space.
And that's that's what it'll take. It's going to take somebody who's ready to take that on, I guess, to write it and to direct it and all of it. So shout out to all you guys out there who are interested in screenwriting, all of you people who want to do that kind of stuff. Here's an idea, you can have it, but just, you know, promise me that you'll do a good job and do us justice. That's all. All right. Well, that was great. You asked one question, Doug. This is what I mean. You have the best questions. You asked one question.
I'm really sorry, man.
And we talked that's exactly it.
That's what we want. Yeah.
Those are our best episodes, or when we just get one question in and then we just go.
Well, like you guys picked probably the, not a knock, but I think you picked the easiest theme for a podcast where it's like, we just let like an autistic guy talk for 30 minutes.
But that's what
I mean, do it. That's a threat.
It's about indulging in that, right? Because how much fun is it? That was the piece, right? How much fun is it for you to have that, for you to talk about that stuff, for us to have this conversation, right? And then
it's like it's like a vanity project, my special interest. It's like, it's like now everyone else gets to hear my useless thoughts.
They're not useless. It's so interesting how our brains work. I think it's fascinating. I do.
Well, thank you. Thank
Do
you.
you have
So
any
Doug,
one last question on your list, Doug, that's like your favorite that you want to ask before we
you
have
had
to
the swearing question. You had the swearing question. I
We
really
had
wanted
this.
to
We
know.
We'll
had
get
the
there.
swearing
That's
question.
the last question.
Well, maybe we were talking a little bit earlier about how podcasts and sitcoms are like a way for connection. I'm wondering, how has stand-up, has that been for you in any way to kind of connect with people that you might not normally had that opportunity to do so?
Oh, it's wonderful because I think that like stand up is one of the only forums that rewards autistic behavior, which is just like, yeah, you're just because what is stand up if not just a guy talking at people? You know what I mean? Like it's great. So I mean, granted, you have to be funny. Like that's the trade off is that you have to entertain them. You can't be boring. But like, to me, it's incredibly gratifying when you're just with a room that's like really digging like what you're doing. I remember. And like what's really fun about my trade is that I've developed a niche where it's like, yes, I've done shows in clubs, I've done corporate functions, but like the shows that I really love doing are when like I did a show in Woodstock where I was in like the basement of like kind of like one of those sort of like child and family services support groups. And so they just had like just a bunch of just audiences of like autistic families in the crowd. And like, I think I went for like 2 hours. They just let me go. And
Nice.
like, I only have like about, at the time, I only had like an hour and 10 minutes worth of material, but they just like, again, it was just, they sort of lent themselves well to like, I kind of encouraged in that forum audience interaction after the 45-minute mark. Cause I went, you know what, I have to fill like an hour and 30 minutes. I don't know if I have like enough material that's good to fill that. So actually I was just like, if anyone has anything to say, and I wasn't like opening up the floor to people, but I would just kind of identify people that looked like you never in an autism crowd, you never pick on someone that
Right.
looked terrified. Like that's the most horrible thing you could do, the meanest thing you could do. But like you look at someone that's kind of sitting on their hands and I'm like, oh, they want to say something really bad.
Yeah.
Their parents are letting them say. I'm like, okay, what do you want to say? And then they'll say something, and then we have like a bit of a riff, and then people kind of laugh because it's like, wow, now it's like I'm part of the show.
Right.
Like that's kind of how they feel. And so like, oh God, that was so fun. So like to me, yeah, like I think that I think it's even better. I would struggle to call it a friend simulator because I think when you're physically present with someone, it almost invites conversation after the fact, or that's the impression I want to give off. So if people were engaging with my stories and in the situations that I talked about, then please come talk to me after the show. Like I've done so many autism gigs where like I'm sort of like opening myself up to conversation after the show where I'm like, no, please. So to me, it's like, yeah, I think it gets past the like, cause that's the depressing thing about podcasts. I joke because my friends started a podcast without me. They didn't start without me. They had a podcast and then they just went, hey, do you want to listen to it sometime? Like just unrelated. We started a podcast. I went, oh, that's cool. And I just realized, so this is how you finally get a word in, huh? You start a podcast without me. Well, who's like, okay, that's very funny, guys. So no, like, there's none of that in a stand-up show because it's like, yeah, technically you could interrupt me at any time. I don't want you to do that. Talk to me after the show, but yeah, it's very there's a very strong communal vibe.
Yeah, I have that too. And I'm definitely struggling too. And presenting to the screen with no audience is kind of weird.
Oh my
but
God, I miss
that
because like
connection happens when you're doing if you're with the right group of people, right? And it's the right environment where they feel comfortable that they can be themselves too. You have that connection piece and that people want to talk to you afterwards. And for me, it's really validating because I spent 36 years of my life thinking I was the only one experiencing all of these things. Right. So it was like, I don't, no one understands my experience. Right. And so it was this realization that, wow, no, people understand it and they are vibing the way that I explain it. And that's really cool.
You know, like I think one of the upsides, I sort of look at a silver linings with the COVID shows because on the one hand I go, it's a really shame because I'm like, I want to be physically present with people. I want to be able to talk to them. I want to be able to actually make them laugh because comedy's gotten really Brechtian over Zoom because people, they don't want you to feel bad because there's no laughing coming through because there'd be an echo. So they just go like, cry laughing emoji. And I'm like, are you guys being like it's like that. I know it comes from a good place, but it's like it's okay. Just like, dude, I know half of you were playing solitaire. You don't have to lie to me. It's fine. but no, like you get into like but one of the things, and this is the silver lining, is that there are so many people that wouldn't have the means to get to one of my shows.
Yep.
Whether that is financial means or like just transit. They don't have like a ride. They don't have a license, whatever. Now, like I can just, on my Facebook page, I can just post like, hey, me and a couple of comics are doing a show like in a couple of days. Here's the link. Tickets are $10 if you want to go. And then, and people are like, sweet, like I wouldn't be able to go see it otherwise. And so now people that haven't been able to see me have been able to see me. And it's great. Awesome. Like and so, yeah, that's like the one thing. And usually after the shows, I like to open things up to a Q&A because to me, I'm like, okay, it's so awkward just pretending I'm not like I'm talking to people, but I'm not talking to people, right? So I'm like, okay, we're just going to have like a 10-minute breakout session where I just, sorry, not breakout session, but a 10-minute just sort of like an informal Q&A where I just talk to people, you know what I mean?
Right.
Sort of do like some weird crowd work over Zoom because to me, I'm like, let's end this on a high note, you know what I mean?
Right.
Let's pretend we're having fun.
All right. Are you ready to do our fun 11 questions?
Oh my God. Yeah. Like I feel bad because I'm like, what questions does James Lipton ask is what I was thinking about because I've actually never
these are all different. Doug wrote them all himself. So we are.
Okay, great.
These are all.
I figured.
These are the better version.
Okay.
They are better.
Okay, we'll go with that. Well, the first one is, what are your pronouns?
He, him.
And what is your preferred stim?
You see, it used to be cracking my knuckles next to my ear, but I think like pacing is probably the enduring one. I realized that my hands were actually, my doctor said you got to stop doing that. So to me, I've always paced. Like, it's just, I actually struggle to think when I'm sitting down. So like, that's why I think I talk with my hands so much. But it's, no pacing. Sorry. There's more questions. I apologize.
Well, me and Becca answered this question earlier, but what is your favorite curse word?
Okay. So, it's kind of weird because like, I don't really curse as much as I thought I did. Most of the curses, like okay, so technically my book, Funny You Don't Look Autistic, they actually re-released it because my publisher said, hey, you know, a lot of like very young kids are liking it. A lot of teachers really want to introduce them to it. There are 2 swears in your book. Could you please cut them out? So for 2 lucky, like, so for like a couple hundred lucky readers, there you have a copy where I swear in it. So
that's awesome.
It is cool. They're both citations though. That's the thing. I went, wait, I never really swear. I realized they are swears. Like I think like my favorite swear is a swear that my dad says in traffic just because I think it's such a, my dad is a 67-year-old man who looks like he's 48, except you'll never know he's an old man until he like swears because it's like, it is technically a swear, but he's like, fuck, pig bastard. I'm like, he's from a 70s movie. It's so good.
Who do you love and what are you doing about it?
What? Sorry, that's so vague. Who do I love and what am I doing? I have a girlfriend and God, maybe I suck at this. I was like, I don't know. She my girlfriend's really funny because like, we have one of those interesting relationships where it's like, I'm into all the things she's into in terms of interest, like Sherlock Holmes, like video game stuff like that. But she's not into all the things I'm into, like movies. So actually recently she's been accommodating me, which has been really sweet. Cause usually like I'll give everything that she loves a day in court and say that I love it. And she usually won't give my stuff the time of day. So recently when I got the Criterion channel, she said, you know what? I want to change that. I want to do something for you. And I went, oh, that's really sweet. So she said, I will let me pick the movie. And she just went, and so I went, that's fine. So she picked a movie called Belle de Jour, starring Kathleen Deneuve. I probably mispronounced that, and she's going to make fun of me because she's like Acadian, which probably gives her less of an excuse to make fun of my French, but whatever. So she's like, she like was expecting it to be sort of like a boring art house movie, but then instead she was like, this is one of the coolest, most progressive things I've ever seen. And I went, this movies surprise you. Movies from the 60s. But yeah, no. So what I usually do for her is like, okay, I will tell you what I did for her. Her birthday this year, I realized because when I was on tour, we were shooting raw material for what is becoming sort of a decade-long documentary about my career and other comedians with autism's careers. And like, I realized I had the first time we ever met like on tape. We were filmed.
Oh my
And
God.
then subsequent footage of us together, like on tour when she was operating the camera and stuff like that. So without her knowing, over the course of a week, I cut together and basically made a 35-minute short chronicling our relationship from the moment we met to present, and sort of like, and all the, and like taking everything from like not like home movies, but like stuff that was sort of professionally shot by by our cameraman who consented to this. So I did that, and then I made like a fake Criterion DVD box with like art made up for her, and anyways, and she cried. It was really sweet. So like I made her a movie. I made her
Nice.
That's great.
Really cool.
Thanks.
Really cool.
You may be neurotypical if.
I don't know. You can't answer this question. Like, I don't know. Like, that's the funny thing, is that like about when we sort of like otherize each other, like I think that everyone is so, like, it's kind of weird because I don't think there's any one thing that's exceptional about neurotypicals that are kind of exceptional about anyone else. I think that's why they're called neurotypical. Sorry, I don't know how to answer that.
No, that's a good answer.
Well, thank you.
You may be autistic if.
You're on the show.
Yeah.
What's something you want to learn or be better at?
Oh my God, I'm learning Japanese right now because, again, that's one of my things where my girlfriend's learning Japanese and she's like, you got to do this. And I started, and now I love it. I think it's great.
Wow.
Cool. What autistic social media account should people be paying attention to?
Oh, I'm going to feel like a jerk because sort of like a lot of my Facebook page is just plugging other autistic channels. Oh my God, I feel like such a jerk right now. I wish I had some stuff in front of me. One that's coming off the top of my head. Check out Nathan McConnell's page for Grownup Aspie. He does web comics. He's a nice guy. Check him out.
Good call.
He's a good person. Austin, Texas based. He's nice.
Yeah, good call.
What's one thing in your routine you couldn't possibly live without?
Oh, one thing in my routine that I like. So does that mean like a joke I will always be telling?
No, like in your daily routine, even. Like
I'm a jerk. Sorry. Movies. Like, honestly, like to me, I just, like, at the end of the day, usually I just watch a movie. I just put something on and I just kind of get real sad. Like, it's, again, you guys were talking about friendship simulators, but like James Monaco has a really good book called How to Read a Film, where he sort of says, you got to be careful that you're not sort of, he jokingly calls them like film addicts, where it's like you kind of rely on film's mimetic properties to provide you with the kind of source of emotional catharsis that you are denied in your real life. And that's a subject that's explored in depth in a really great book. If you haven't read it, check it out, called The Moviegoer. I forget who wrote it, but it's amazing. And to me, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like the lockdown has kind of exacerbated those qualities, just because, like, see, guys, thank you. This is like the first time I've talked to someone this week, which is really nice. Yeah. But like, but it's like, as I'm sure you kind of know, it's like, regardless if you're an extrovert or an introvert, I think everyone in some capacity needs, if not company, acknowledgement. Like, I think people are just deeply lonely, and this is sort of like and it's tough for a lot of people with ASD right now, because like I've been talking to people where they're kind of like, most of their interactions come through digital interface. Yeah. But now that, as much as people joke about like, I'm autistic, I've been training for this day, now that they're actually here, it's kind of like, wow, this actually kind of sucks, because for them, they're sort of like, well, one, because they're usually financially compromised, because there's usually like a lot of people, unfortunately, been laid off. My girlfriend has been laid off, which is terrible. But it's like, but it just, again, people crave intimacy. Like, and you know what I mean? People, I think, misread intimacy often as like physical intimacy. No, they just mean like being like having someone that they can trust or just listen to them. Yeah. And I think that now is really kind of a tough time for that.
Yeah, for Definitely. Sure.
Dog, cat, or must I choose?
Bird.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I I'm raising 2 budgies, and they are awesome. I like. Here's what I do. I hold like 2 things of spray millet in each hand, and I do this, and then they sit on my hands, and I hold them like guns, like I'm in a John Woo movie. It's awesome.
That's so fun.
Oh, dude, it's great. And like I love them. They're amazing.
Oh, that's so cool.
And the last question, what does autistic joy mean to you?
Autistic joy. Well, I mean, really, I think it's been like autistic joy is basically talking about what you like uninterrupted for 45 minutes. So thanks for guys making that dream come true. That was really fun.
We win.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it really is. And that's what I think we want to share with everyone is that we do experience joy, and it just looks different than yours. But
yeah, no, I think we experienced too much joy. I remember like, I mean, but it is kind of like, no, that's weird. I mean, like there is something really adorable when it's like, again, my girlfriend who's on the spectrum, right? Like she, there will be these moments where like she really disappears into something. And to me, like, even though I get lost in a lot of the specifics, I kind of fall deeper in love with her just because of like the obvious, you know what I mean? Where it's like people that are passionate about something or just they have a contagious energy to them.
yeah.
So when she's talking about like, she really loves computer sciences. So she loves talking about hardware, software. She rebuilds old IBMs that people are like, yeah, I'm taking this to the dump. If you want it, you can repair it.
Wow.
And she does. Because she's like, this is a living thing, and she breathes new life into it. So for her, she's like watching her like just hard at work, like, you know, just like
In hyperfocus mode, right?
Yeah, no, like I've totally dabbed sweat from her forehead while she's using both hands, just because I'm like, look, I don't know what's going on, but this is just, it's charming.
Yeah. It's great to see someone in their place like that. They're like in their flow, doing their thing, and you know that they're like that they could be there forever if you let them. And that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have had this conversation this morning because I was kind of in a poopy mood when we first started, and now I'm in a good mood. And I have movies I want to watch now. And I also need to look up semiotics, which I didn't think I would ever need to know.
I didn't know about it until like, it's crazy what you end up discovering in COVID, because like the way that I do things is because so many of my gigs just unfortunately, you know, kind of most of my commitments were fulfilled last year because people wanted to kind of recoup costs and we're like, okay, we got to put this on anyways. We're just going to switch to virtual. But then like just no new gigs came in because a lot of people were like, okay, we got that out of the way. Now we're just going to regroup and sort of see what we have to do. So there wasn't much there. So to me, I was like, okay, I'm just going to allocate like hourly, like a task to hourly blocks. So like every hour from like 10 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, I'll just be working on something new. So it's like, instead of doing a lot of one thing every day, you're doing a little of a lot of things every day.
Yep.
And you just feel good because you're kind of like, you're accumulating stuff. And so like, oh God, I forget where I was doing this. And yeah, right. So semiotic came about because I was just like, I just said, I got to read more. So every day I would just read like for an hour, and I was reading this one book and I went, what is this? And suddenly it almost kind of like, yeah, I think it kind of cracked a code that I didn't know there was about just like, yeah, let's, we're figuring out the secrets. We're figuring out how the world works. We're figuring out why we think things.
Right.
Now I'm really going to be annoying at dinner. Like now I'm really going to be like insufferable to be around.
Well, I'm going to go researching it. So you might get an email from me if I think it's really interesting, because then I won't have anyone to talk to about it either.
Hey, not a problem. I remember like, oh God, there's start with Umberto Eco because like, because again, he started writing essays, but then kind of didn't graduate, but then started writing more kind of accessible pop fiction type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's a good place to start.
Thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us here on InfoDup. Thank you so much, Michael McCreary. He has books out. You can go to his website, AspieComic.com. You can find him. You can book him. You can contact him, all that fun stuff. But he's a really fun guy. And so check out what he's doing on Facebook so you can keep up with his gigs, his virtual gigs that he's doing.
Yeah, thank you so much,
I'll see you next time.
Doug.
Right?
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.